Okay, guys, we are in a really important part of Pedro Paramo right here. You were supposed to read to the top of page 58, and I'm wondering if you noticed what happened to Juan Preciado, our main narrator. I'm guessing you might have missed it. He died. That is right. He is now dead. So, um, I'm going to say two things about his death, and this is going to seem confusing to you, but just bear with me. There are two schools of thought in literary criticism about this book, about Juan Preciado and his status in the book. So, at this point in the book, they say he dies. There's a whole conversation we're about to read where he gets buried and all of those kind of things. However, there are some people who believe that from the very beginning of the book, when he shows up in Komala, walking down the street, and he's thinking about the day before when he was in another town and it was beautiful, that he's actually already dead and that he has just shown up in Kamala as a ghost. So he's talking to all these other ghosts. He is also a ghost, which would leave only Donis and his sister as the only living inhabitants of Komala, Juan Preciado not being alive. They mention some other people that are also alive, but we never actually meet any of them. So that is one school of thought. I kind of am like, no, I'm not going there. I believe he is alive at the beginning of the book. I believe he comes to Kamala just like his mom told him to. I believe he dies while he's in Kamala, which is what has just happened. And then he enters into a new realm of ghosts in Kamala. So far, we've seen the ghosts that are walking around the town, that are all these murmurs and voices that he kind of hears inside his body. Again, still, we have Donis and his sister, who notice never gets a name. She's just Donis's sister. Um, and they are the only living inhabitants. There are some other people, and this is why Donis and his sister have decided to commit incest while they're sleeping together. It's kind of like that whole story when you think about like Adam and Eve. They have some kids. How the heck are there more kids? Well, brothers and sisters had to have married each other and had children together. Kind of the same thing. The town has been emptied out. The only two people left alive, a man and a woman, they are brother and sister. In order to fill the town with inhabitants, again, they must have sex, they must be married, they must have children. Okay. So let's move on from that. So, what actually happens is that night, Juan lays down in the bed with Donis's sister because Donis is out looking for the cattle or some livestock. I can't remember what it was. He's off looking for this lost lamb or lost cow. He leaves Juan alone. In the middle of the night, Juan says he gets really hot and the woman has like turned into mud. This is not the first or the last reference we will see to mud in the story, which kind of signifies this idea of sin and bad women in general. So he gets really hot. He gets out of bed. He starts wandering around. He's wandering around town when he dies. And that is the last memory he has. He sees foamy head swirling above his head and then washed by the foam and sinking into the thick clouds. That was the last thing I saw ever because he's dead now. Okay, moving on. So here we go with page 58. And now we have someone else talking here to Juan Preciado. Pay attention, we're about to learn about a new character. Are you trying to make me believe you drowned, Juan Preciado? I found you in the town plaza, far from Donis's house, and he was there too, telling me you were playing dead. Between us, we dragged you into the shadow of the arches, already stiff as a board and all drawn up like a person who died of fright. If there hadn't been any air to breathe that night you're talking about, we wouldn't have had the strength to carry you, even less bury you. And as you see, bury you we did. You're right, Doroteo. You say your name's Doroteo? It doesn't matter. It's really Dorotea, but it doesn't matter. It's true, Dorotea. The murmuring killed me. We have heard about voices and murmuring all throughout this ghost town, and he suggests that all of this murmuring like drove him crazy, maybe made him have a stroke, have a heart attack. When he says he couldn't breathe anymore, he couldn't breathe the air, that suggests some kind of seizure of some sort or something taking over his body where his body shuts down. Then we have the italicized voice, which we know is his mother. There you'll find the place I love most in the world, the place where I grew thin from dreaming, my village rising from the plain, shaded with trees and leaves like a piggy bank filled with memories. You'll see why a person would want to live there forever. Lots of people live in there forever, ever, because they're ghosts. Dawn, morning, midday, night, always the same, except for the changes in the air. The air changes the color of things there, and life whirs by as quiet as a murmur, the pure murmuring of life. So if life is a murmur, it is possible that the murmur could take away your life. I don't know, it's kind of an interesting connection to murmuring and it being a symbol of life or not. Okay, yes, Dorothea, the murmuring killed me. I was trying to hold back my fear, but it kept building until I couldn't contain it any longer. And when I was face to face with the murmuring, the dam burst. I went to the plaza. You're right about that. I was drawn there by the sound of people. I thought there really were people. I wasn't in my right mind by then. I remember I got there by feeling my way along the walls, as if I were walking with my hands. And the walls seemed to distill the voices. They seemed to be filtering through the cracks and crumbling mortar. I heard them, human voices, not clear, but secretive voices that seemed to be whispering something to me as I passed, like a buzzing in my ears. This again is that idea of a murmur. I moved away from the walls and continued down the middle of the street, but I still heard them. They seemed to be keeping pace with me, ahead of me, or just behind me. Like I told you, I wasn't hot anymore, just the opposite. I was cold. From the time I left the house of that woman who let me use her bed, the one, I told you, I'd seen dissolving in the liquid of her sweat. From that time on, I'd felt cold, and the farther I walked, the colder I got, until my skin was all goosebumps. I wanted to turn back. I thought that if I went back, I might find the warmth I'd left behind. But I realized after I walked a bit farther that the cold was coming from me. So bodies turn cold when they die. Okay, so this lack of heat signals the loss of life in his body from my own blood. Then I realized I was afraid. I heard all the noise in the plaza, and I thought I'd find people there to help me get over my fear. That's how you came to find me in the plaza. So Donis came back after all? The woman was sure she'd never see him again, the woman being his sister. It was morning by the time we found you. I don't know where he came from. I didn't ask him. Well, anyway, I reached the plaza. I leaned against a pillar of the arcade. I saw that it's not a real arcade. Arcade is like a place, it's like a courtyard. I saw that no one was there, even though I could still hear the murmuring of voices like a crowd on market day. A steady sound with no words to it, like the sound of the wind through the branches of a tree at night, when you can't see the tree or the branches, but you hear the whispering, like that. I couldn't take another step. I began to sense that whispering drawing nearer, circling around me, a constant buzzing like a swarm of bees, until finally I could hear the almost soundless words. Pray for us. I could hear that's what they were saying to me. At that moment, my soul turned to ice. That's why you found me dead. Okay, so again, with the murmuring voices, and they're all asking him to pray for them. And there was a comment made by Donis's sister earlier about how there weren't enough live people left in the town to pray for the dead ghosts. So the ghosts are asking them to pray for their souls so that they can move on to heaven or hell. And they drive him so nuts with their murmuring and asking for help that they kill him. You'd have done better to stay home. Why did you come here? This is Dorothea talking. I told you that at the very beginning. I came to find Pedro Paramo, who they say was my father. Hope brought me here. Hope? You pay dear for that. My illusions made me live longer than I should have, and that was the price I paid to find my son, who in a manner of speaking was just one more illusion. This is Dorothea talking, and we're going to learn a lot more about her life in the coming pages. She becomes a new character here for us. Now that I'm dead, that was one more illusion because I never had a son. Now that I'm dead, I've had time to think and understand. God never gave me so much as a nest, which is code for a womb, to shelter my baby in. Only an endless lifetime of dragging myself from pillar to post, sad eyes casting sidelong glances, always looking past people, suspicious that this one or that one had hidden my baby from me. And it was all the fault of one bad dream. I had two. One of them I call the good dream, and the other the bad dream. The first was the one that made me dream I had a son to begin with, and as long as I lived, I always believed it was true. I could feel him in my arms, my sweet baby, with his little mouth and eyes and hands. For a long, long time, I could feel his eyelids and the beating of his heart on my fingertips. Why wouldn't I think it was true? I carried him with me everywhere I went, wrapped in my rebozo, and then one day I lost him. In heaven, they told me they'd made a mistake, that they'd given me a mother's heart, but the womb of a whore. That was the other dream I had. I went up to heaven and peeked in to see whether I could recognize my son's face among the angels. Nothing. The faces were all the same, all made from the same mold. Then I asked. One of those saints came over to me and without a word sank his hand into my stomach like he would have poked into a ball of wax. When he pulled out his hand, he showed me something that looked like a nutshell. This proves what I'm demonstrating to you. Okay, so Dorothea, I will tell you right now, and we're about to find out more about her. She has a serious problem, a psychological problem. She desperately wants a baby. She never has one. She imagines that she has one because she had a dream that she had one, and then she thinks she can feel it in his arms. She got some mental issues, and we will see that as we hear her story from the Media Luna. You know how strange they talk up there, but you can understand what they're saying. I wanted to tell them that it was just my stomach. This is Dorothea still talking. All dried up from hunger and nothing to eat. But another one of those saints took me by the shoulders and pushed me to the door. Go rest a while more on earth, my daughter, and try to be good so that your time in purgatory will be shortened. So in this dream, it's suggested that she still has time to heal her soul so she won't end up in purgatory and so she can go to heaven or to hell, really, technically, although I think they're drawing her to heaven. This is part of really old-fashioned conservative Catholic doctrine, this idea that there was a space for people to go to who weren't really bad people, but maybe did some bad stuff and didn't get forgiven for it before they died. Then they end up in this place called purgatory, this in-between space. Okay, so she continues she's still talking to Juan Preciado. That was my bad dream, and the one where I learned I never had a son. I learned it very late, after my body had already shriveled up and my backbone jutted up higher than the top of my head, and I couldn't walk anymore. And to top it off, everyone was leaving the village. All the people set out for somewhere else and took their charity with them. I sat down to wait for death. After we found you, my bones determined to find their rest. No one will notice me, I thought. I won't be a bother to anyone. You see, I didn't even steal space from the earth. They buried me in the grave with you, and I fit right in the hollow of your arms. Here in this little space where I am now. The only thing is that I should have my arms around you, you hear? It's raining up there. Don't you hear the drumming of the rain? Okay. This right here is the first mention we get of where exactly they are at. So Juan Preciado has now descended into a different layer of death, okay? The top layer, where the ghosts are all walking around, that's one layer of purgatory. Now he finds himself buried in a grave with this woman, Dorothea, and she is talking to him. I know, it's crazy. It's magical realism. Okay. He says, I hear something like someone walking above us. She says, you don't have to be afraid. No one can scare you now. Try to think nice thoughts because we're going to be a long time here in the ground. Okay. Now, we start off this next line, big A, and it's raining. So we're back in past tense Kamala. Okay. And we're going to hear Dorothea's story here in past tense Kamala, although it does wrap around Pedro and his life as well. Okay, here we go. At dawn, a heavy rain was falling over the earth. It thudded dully as it struck the soft, loose dust of the furrows. A mockingbird swooped low across the field and wailed, imitating a child's plaint. A little farther, it sang something that sounded like a sob of weariness, and in the distance where the horizon had begun to clear, it hiccuped and then laughed, only to wail once more. Okay, all this beautiful, pretty birds flying around and water raining down tells us we're in a Kamala that is alive, that has plants and crops and all of that stuff and animals. Fulgur Sedano, we've seen his name before. He's the one that runs the Media Luna for the Paramos. Breathed in the scent of fresh air and looked out to see how the rain was penetrating the furrows. Furrows are like the lines of dirt where they're planting crops. His little eyes, yes, his little eyes were happy. He took 3 deep gulps, relishing the savor, and grinned till his teeth showed. Ah, he said, we're about to have another good year, and then added, come on down, Rain, come on down, fall until you can't fall anymore, and then move on. Remember that we worked the ground just to pleasure you. And he laughed aloud. Returning from its survey of the fields, the mockingbird flew past him and wailed a heart-rending wail. The rain intensified until in the distance, where it had begun to grow light, the clouds closed in, and it seemed that the darkness that had been retreating was returning. The huge gate of the Media Luna squealed as it swung open, wet from the moist wind. First 2, then another 2, then 2 more rode out, until 200 men on horseback had scattered across the rain-soaked fields. We'll have to drive the En Medio herd up past where Estagua used to be, and Estagua cattle up to the Vilmayo hills, Fulgur Sedano ordered as the men rode by. And hustle, the rain's really coming down. He said it so often that the last to leave heard only, from here to there, and from there farther on up. Every man of them touched the brim of his hat to show that he had understood. Almost immediately after the last man had left, Miguel Paramo galloped in at full tilt without reining in his horse, dismounted almost in Fulgur's face, leaving his mount to find its own way to the stall. So it's early in the morning because the cowboys are just going out to tend to the herds of cattle, okay? And Miguel Paramo is just getting home because he's been out partying all night and doing bad stuff because he's a bad guy. And he even gets off his horse and doesn't even take his horse back to the stables. He just lets his horse wander around, whatever. He's a spoiled, rotten little brat, but he's not dead yet. Okay, so that's where we're at in the story. He is a, adult male, late teens, early 20s probably. Where have you been at this hour, boy? Been doing a little milking? Milking who? You can't guess. Must have been that Dorotea. La Curaca. She's the only one around here likes babies. Okay, so this reference to milking has to do with sex. Okay, so he's like, oh, you've been out carousing with some girl. He's like, who is it? He's like, you don't know who it is? And he suggests it's this girl Dorotea, who we already know is the one who's buried in the grave with Juan Preciado. Okay. And she's the only one around here likes babies. Okay, that goes along with her story about how she desperately wants a child. You're a full Fulgur, but it's not your fault. And without bothering to remove his spurs, Miguel went off to find someone to feed him breakfast. In the kitchen, Damiana Cisneros asked him the same question. Damiana was a ghost that we saw walking around in the town, the one that came to get Juan Preciado from Edavije's house and took him out into the town and told him all about Aldrete being hung in that room and all that stuff. And we found out she's kind of like the maid or the matron of Media Luna. She's not married to Pedro Paramo, but she takes care of everything. She took care of his sons when they were babies. She fixes the breakfast. Okay? In the kitchen, Damiana Cisneros asked him the same question. Now, where have you been, Miguel? Oh, just around, calling on the mothers of the region. I didn't mean to rile you, Miguel. How do you want your eggs? Could I have them with a special side dish? I'm being serious, Miguel. I know, Damiana. Don't worry. Listen, do you know a woman named Dorotea, the one they call La Curaca? I do, and if you want to see her, you'll find her right outside. She gets up early every morning to come by here for her breakfast. She's the one who rolls up a bundle in her rebozo and sings to it and calls it her baby. It must be that something terrible happened to her a long while back, but since she never talks, no one knows what it was. She lives on handouts, so she's a beggar. She's outside the breakfast room where Miguel has gone in to get his breakfast. When he says, could I have something with a special side dish? He's again talking about sex. And Damiana's like, I'm being serious, Miguel. We're not having sex. Get a grip. And then he asks where Dorotea is because he doesn't really realize who she is. Even though Don Fulgur has mentioned her, he's never paid that much attention to her, and there's a good reason why. Because she's a beggar. She's not attractive. She's crazy. She's walking around with a bundle, acting like it's her baby. And he gets mad. He says, that damn Fulgur, I'm going to give him a lick that'll make his eyes whirl. Because he suggested that he should go after Dorotea and go have sex with her. And he's like, I'm not having sex with her. She's nasty. She's a bum. She's begging. He sat and thought for a while, wondering how the woman might be of use to him. He's talking about Dorothea. Then, without further hesitation, he went to the back kitchen door and called Dorothea. "Come here a minute. I've got a proposition to make you," he said. Who knows what deal he offered her? The fact is that when he came inside, he was rubbing his hands. So it's kind of like one of those moves where the evil guy like rubs his hands together because he's hatched an evil plot. He makes some kind of deal with Dorothea. We don't know what it is. We have to figure it out, and we'll figure it out soon enough. Now, you need to read from page 64, where he continues talking to Damiana, to 66, here with the capital T. So notice this is continuing with Miguel and him talking to Damiana. Then we have Juan Preciado back in the grave talking to Dorothea. And then we stop here, okay? And that's where I want you to stop with the "they pounded at his door." So just read a couple more pages. Okay, that's all for today. See you later.